Okay, now here we are with part 3. So we'll see what happens with part 3. Now, I hope that I'm going to recap so that you don't even have to listen to all 3 parts. So I made a quick batch of mayonnaise. It literally takes less than 2 minutes. So please, please make your mayonnaise. Don't buy the stuff in the store. That stuff is terrible for you. And what we're going to do with those mayonnaise is make a herbed mayonnaise. So I did add the mustard powder and the cayenne pepper to give it a little bit of body. And now I'm chopping up fresh herbs out of the garden. If you can use fresh, please use fresh. Don't use dried stuff. As much as I would love for you to come and buy things from TSL Organics at the markets that I'm at, it is much better to use fresh. Now, I've got more than I need. I want about a tablespoon. This is fresh dill that I just picked out of my garden moments ago. Make sure that you rinse your herbs really well. And you don't want to use the stalk in the mayonnaise. It's fine to use, and it's very tender right now, but I just don't want a lot of that in there because I want this to be very tender and fine, and you're going to get a tremendous amount of flavor. Now, you can probably see I have a little bit of the stem in there, and that's fine. I just don't want to add lots and lots. Now, the flower of the basil, the flower of the dill is beautiful and tender, and we can add that in there as well. If it's gone to seed, you don't want to add that. It gets a lot tougher after that. So this, we want to add 15 milliliters. I don't know what that's going to weigh. And you know what? I'm not terribly woohoo! Success! We have no echo. So we have our fresh mayonnaise that we made. We have no echo. And we have 1 tablespoon or 15 milliliters-ish. I maybe don't have quite that much of fresh dill. Well, that's okay. I don't want quite that much. I want about half a tablespoon. And if you pack it in there, that's about what it is. A little more than you're supposed to have or than you thought you were going to use, don't worry about it. They are herbs. They are lovely. Now, the next thing I am going to add in there, I'm not going to add the dill flowers, but I am going to add some fresh thyme. Or, no, I'm not. Fresh oregano. I could add thyme. I have thyme and marjoram and celery and parsley. I've got all kinds of stuff growing in my herb garden. Do not use the branch. This is a shrub. Those are woody and definitely not what you're wanting. And so I'll take that out of there. Now with oregano, depending on how much you like oregano, and I love oregano, but still you want to be very careful how much you use because it's very potent. Not everybody likes oregano. My husband doesn't. Don't know why. There are a lot of things that he doesn't like. I was just telling somebody yesterday he is absolutely the pickiest man that I have ever known, but he picked me, so I'm going to keep him. Okay, now this, I'm just pulling the leaves off of here and getting rid of the little stems. If you were putting this in a herb grinder to powder it, then you wouldn't have to worry about that so much. I've still got a couple little stems in here. Okay, now we want just a few. We don't want very many of these at all. We can always add more later. And look at that. I got the end of it. I just want the leaves. And I'm leaving the leaves whole because they're not quite as potent if you leave them whole. So we're just going to push these little leftover bits aside because we're going to be using those in a few minutes. Okay, now, next thing we want in there is some chives. Now, chives are so easy to grow. If you are not growing them in your garden, I bet you know somebody who is. And there's something that, in my opinion, you definitely want to use fresh. And we're going to use about a tablespoon. And these don't need to be chopped quite as fine as some of the other herbs because they are just so yummy and they're very tender. So they're not going to have an adverse effect in your mouth. You're not going to feel like you're chewing on sticks. Rosemary, oregano branches, they can feel like that. And not pleasant, not when it's something creamy and delicious. Now, the next thing that we're going to do after we're done this is we are going to make a basil vinaigrette, and it is easy and simple. Okay, so we have about a tablespoon, give or take. Well, maybe not quite a tablespoon. I might have to go out and get some more later. But for right now, we're going to add those in there. This is not something that you have to be really persnickety about. And the next thing we're going to add is one of my favorite things. This is fresh parsley out of my garden. You just want the leaves. The stems of parsley, these are wonderful for soups and stews and all kinds of stuff. And if you're going to throw it in a blender and grind it up, then there's no reason to get rid of them. But today I don't want to throw everything in a blender. I want everything to be nice and fresh and just chopped so that we can see it. And the other thing is, when you put it through a blender or a food processor or whatever you're using, you are also making it much stronger. Now I'm just gonna roll my stack of parsley leaves up a little bit. Makes it a little easier to chop it. And I'm gonna chop them fairly fine. Just the herbs, not the fingers. That's kind of an important part of the recipe. Okay. And I think that is about enough parsley, so we're going to gather that up and put it in our bowl. And then we're going to grab 5 or 6 basil leaves. And I don't really care so much how these ones look. Now, the thing about basil, every other herb will dry very well. And I mean drip dry after you've washed it. Basil leaves, not so much because they're curvy. So we just want to make sure that we are taking any leftover little droplets off. Okay. That should about do it. I don't want water in our fresh mayonnaise. And look at that, we have a little basil blossom, and we're just going to leave that right in there. Okay. Have you ever made a basil salad? Or have you added basil to fresh strawberries? Oh my goodness. If you haven't, I'm telling you, you should. Now stack the basil leaves up and roll them, kind of the same as we just did to the parsley. If I'm doing this for strawberries, I always take a little more time and make sure that they're going to be very pretty little ribbons at the end. And what I am not going to put in is the tips of the basil leaves because they're just a little bit more coarse. And we're just going to chop this up so we don't have long strings of basil in there. And besides, the more you chop it, the more intense your flavor is going to be, and intense basil flavor, nothing wrong with that. Okay, now we are going to take all of these fresh herbs that we just made and into our fresh mayonnaise that we just made. I am going to add, reaching across, I'm going to add just a sprinkle of salt. And we're going to dump all of these fresh herbs in this jar with our mayonnaise. And I should have mixed it in rather than... But this is going to chop it up a little bit as well. So... That is enough noise for one day. Hi, Del. Okay, now this is going to be absolutely amazing on fish or chicken if you're barbecuing. You can use this as a salad dressing. It has all kinds of flavor in it. You can use it to make deviled eggs, and it will give your deviled eggs a flavor that they've never had before. And you can also add some avocado to your deviled eggs. Okay, now we're going to take that off and set this guy over here. Oh, and we're just going to give this a little bit more of a mix. Now look at what we've got going on in here. You see all of those little bits of fresh herbs in here. And I don't care what kind of a sandwich you're making, this is going to be absolutely amazing. And you can put this in the fridge and it will keep, as long as your herbs are really fresh, it will keep for a week or so. Okay, now, in my opinion, this needs more salt. So, I'm just going to add a little bit more. And this is why I left the salt until after. Because you don't know, when you start changing a recipe, you don't know what it's going to be like. Okay, look at this. And on the finger again it goes. Oh my heavens. That is wonderful. Now we're going to do one more thing. We're going to do it quick. A basil vinaigrette. Now the rest of the garlic scapes that we have, we're going to just chop up some of those real quick. We're going to use the same herb bowl because it's just herbs. And this one, we're going to use a whole cup of basil. Okay. Now we're just going to give this a chop. Now when you're going to a barbecue, how many times have you gone to a barbecue as somebody who's doing keto and there's a beautiful salad there that's 100% keto, and there is not one salad dressing that you can use that is keto friendly. So what do? And the answer to that is a very personal one. Are you going to... Okay, now I am taking all of the rest, so there's a tiny little bit of dill in here. There's a tiny little bit of a few things in there, and it's going to make this even better. Now, the next thing that we are going to do is we're going to take a whole, well, a cup-ish of basil leaves, and we're going to chop that up. So just kind of a packed cup. Because this is going to be a basil vinaigrette. And so a little bit of, there we go. That is about enough. Now I'm just going to set that aside and give these just a rough chop. These don't need to be chopped super fine. They can be just chopped, just a rough chop. And here's the rest of our garlic scapes on our knife. So do you want to put these in a blender? Maybe. I should have stacked them up a little bit more. I've got basil flowers in here, and I've got basil leaves in here. And we are going to add this to 1.5 tablespoons of Chardonnay vinegar. You can use red wine vinegar, champagne vinegar, what else could you use? Apple cider vinegar, white vinegar, whatever kind of vinegar you want to use. And we're going to use 1.5 tablespoons, so 15, 20 milliliters-ish, give or take. And 1/4 of a cup of avocado oil. And that is as easy as it is. Now you can add, we've got our garlic and our other little bits of herbs. I'm just making sure that I've got the buds chopped up in here. And if you're using the flowers off your basil plant, make sure you give them a taste. Sometimes they can be kind of bitter. These ones are not. These ones are lovely. And there's one flower that was done that just didn't quite get washed off. It wouldn't hurt anything, but... Okay, so now we need our next jar. Whoops, that's the wrong one. And we are going to pack our basil in here. And some of these are a little bit bigger, so I'm going to give them a bit more of a chop. Can you see this, the jar? So I've got part of the basil in there. The bigger bits I'm going to give just a bit more of a chop right now. So when you're making a vinaigrette, remember the proportions that we're using here. Oh, and we've gone over today, but you know what? This is just so delicious. It is definitely worth the extra time. Okay. Let's get this in here. We'll get all of these beautiful herbs off the... Be very careful not to cut yourself. Easiest way to make sure you don't cut yourself is to make sure your knives are sharp. So make sure your knives are sharp. Okay, so we have that. Oh my goodness. Now this is taking a much bigger jar than it should need because the basil is all big and poofy. That's a very technical cooking term, big and poofy herbs. Okay, now we are going to add a quarter of a cup, give or take. And get my other little scraping it out of the jar tool. Okay, now 1.5 tablespoons of the vinegar of your choice. So I'm using a Chardonnay vinegar today, and I just used the bottom of it, and there is no more. So since I've run out of that, we are going to improvise. I need 1.5, so I'm going to use just a wee bit of apple cider vinegar. And I know I need to go vinegar shopping again. Now the one thing you want to make sure is that your vinegar that you're using does not have sugar in it. And I know that should kind of go without saying, but sadly it does not. Okay, now let's give this a stir. And this, along with one other thing that I'm going to add in here. Well, a couple other things, because we're going to add salt and pepper. But just a wee little pinch. Now, don't ever reach into a dried spice package. If you have any moisture on your fingers, it could wreck the spices. So I'm adding just a wee bit of crushed chili flakes. And you can add as much or as little as you like. And you can see this doesn't look like a normal vinaigrette, and that's okay, because this is going to make your salad taste amazing. It's almost like making a salad in a jar. And we're going to add just a wee bit of salt in there. And I think I'm just going to leave the pepper to add on the plate. But the salt brings out the flavor, and just watch this. It is going to turn into the most beautiful vinaigrette. And you can make as much or as little of this as you want. Now you can also add much more oil and much more vinegar, and it won't be It won't look like a salad in a jar, but it's still going to taste amazing. So 1/4 oil, 3/4, or 1/4 vinegar, 3/4 oil is kind of the proportion. And so look in the jar at what we got going on there. And that is going to sit in here, and it's going to do its little vinaigrette thing until probably tomorrow. But I am going to take a taste. You want to make sure that you've got the salt content right. Oh my. Yeah, you definitely want to do that. So, half of a small clove of garlic, a cup of chopped fresh basil, and I can see the liquid already gathering in the bottom. The liquid out of the basil is going to help make this vinaigrette. 1/4 cup of avocado oil, a tablespoon and a half of vinegar, champagne vinegar, Chardonnay vinegar, whatever kind of vinegar you want. Now I think I might make some flavored vinegar in this jar. That seems like a really good idea. A little bit of red pepper flakes to taste, and salt and pepper, or just salt in this case. And you have a beautiful jar of vinaigrette. I hope all of you do your very best to live your best version of this shining life this week. That's what I'm going to do. And I started telling you about a lady this week who got quite angry with me because I said to her exactly like this: I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, and that's important for you to remember. I have done a lot of research on the ketogenic diet and the effect that it has on the body and how it works in the body, and the research that has been done to support it, and research that has not been done to support other stories that we've been told. So what I said to her was, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, and I encourage you to do your own research. But did you know there has never been a medical study done that shows a direct correlation between sodium intake and high blood pressure? Now that's the truth. And I have challenged several medical professionals that have told me that I'm wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about, and there are things that I'm wrong about, and I don't claim to know everything, but not one of them, not one, has been able to show me a study that actually showed a direct correlation. You cannot do a study with however many people that are eating all kinds of carbohydrates and fat together with sugar in one meal, and there's a little bit of salt in there, and you say, oh, well, it was the salt that did it. It just doesn't work like that. So, do your research, ask questions, honor your body, do your very best to be the best version of yourself this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Please click like and subscribe and the bells and the thumbs up and all of the things, because it gives us a bit of a boost, and we love that you join us. Please have an amazing week. Thank you for being here. Bye for now.